Welcome to the first theme we're discussing, and it is the organization theme. It happens to be the second theme of the PRINCE2 methodology. But we discussed the organization theme first because it gives us the clear picture of the people that will be involved on the project. And when using them in the other themes, it's easier to explain. So, take note, the purpose of the organization theme is to define and establish the project structure of accountability and responsibilities. So click on next and let's continue. So what we're going to be discussing regarding the organization theme, you need to know that the organization theme is focused on the people. So we're going to be defining the roles and, of course, mention their responsibilities. You need to understand that these are the people that represent the project management team on a PRINCE2 project. And of course, the purpose of the organization theme is to define and establish the project's structure of accountability and responsibility. And of course, we mentioned things about stakeholders as well. So let's continue. For a start, we need to mention these key levels in the organization theme. Now, for every environment or every project, there's always going to be the position of those who own the project, who the project is triggered from, who are the ones who actually decide to do the project. And these people could either be a corporate entity, which is a company, or it could simply be an organization trying to create something and they have lists, or should I say multiple projects running at the same time. So they set up what we call a program organization, a program management scheme to manage all the projects together. So at the very top of the structure for organization theme is what we call the business strategy level, where you have the corporate entities or the program management levels. And also there you can also find a singular customer. Right. Sometimes if you do a Google search, you might find that they use the word customer to combine that level. Now, after that level, once the project starts, the remaining three levels come into play. And these three levels fall into the category of the project management team. So within the project management team, we have the highest level within the project management team being the level where directives are coming from. That level is responsible for the success of the project and they give directions to the project. After that level uses the management level to exact control over the project, and the management level is held by the project manager. So the project manager manages the day-to-day activities of the project on behalf of those in the directing level, known as the project board. And of course, the project manager exerts their authority on the teams that are present to deliver the products of the project. So we have the corporate or program at the highest level outside the project, while within the project management team, we have the project board at the highest level within the project management team, followed by the management level where we have the project manager, and followed by the delivery level where we have the teams and the team manager. So have this picture at the back of your mind all the time during the course of our discussion, because this is very important. This is the structure of accountability that we use in PRINCE2. So let's discuss the interests on the next slide. Now, for every project, there has to be what we call interests that are involved on the project. Now, these three interests should be present for us to have a balanced decision on the project. Now, we have the three to be business, user, and supplier. The business interest, their focus is to make sure that there's funding for the project, the funds are spent correctly, and also that we're getting a value for our money, and as well as the delivery of benefits. The business focuses on funding, spending, getting value for money, and also realizing benefits. The user interest, their focus is on the distinct definition of the products. They're also the ones that will use the products to realize the benefits that we require from the project. That's the focus of the user interest. While the supplier interest, they are the ones that know how the products defined by the user will be created. They understand the technical specifications and the integrity of those products. So they have to give their input on how the product will be created. Now, for instance, if we don't have either of this on the project, there'll be an imbalance. For example, if the business interest is not involved in the project, it means that users will define the products, but they may not be sure that they'll get value for the money. And it means that funding might be a problem. Of course, the suppliers are present so where you know how the product will be created. Now, let's say the users are not involved, but there's the business and the supplier. The thing is, the correct or distinct product required for the project will not be present. Funding will be there, but products that should help us realize benefits may not be properly defined. And if you create a product that you're not sure will deliver the project's benefits, it means that you'll be wasting your money. Lastly, if the supplier interest won't be present, it means that funding is available, the product is available, but we do not know the best way to get it created, and that will be a problem. Either way, if one is missing, achieving success in the project is not assured. So let's continue. One thing for certain is the interest we have mentioned earlier, they all have to have representatives on the project board. So what you're seeing here that looks like an organogram is the organizational structure for the PRINCE2 project. Of course, at the very top, you can see the corporate or program management already established there, and they are always going to be external to the project. At the next level, we have the project board, where we have representatives of the users, representatives of the business, and representatives of the suppliers. Please take note. The representatives of the users are called senior users. The representative of the the representative of the business is known as the executive, while the representative of the suppliers is known as the senior suppliers. And the next level of authority, we have the management level, where we have the project manager. And of course, we have the team managers that the project manager exerts their authority over. That's the delivery level. So you have the team managers right there at the bottom with the team members. But you'll be Very observant to note that there are also some other roles indicated here. Let's start with the ones directly under the senior users. Now, this role is considered the project assurance role. They come on board to represent the project board in tracking and confirming certain things on behalf of the interest of the project board members. We have the change authority who come on board on behalf of the project board to help manage handling of certain issues on the project in the absence of project board members. And of course, we have the project support who comes on board the project to assist the project manager in handling clerical and some research duties. Let's take each of them one after the other. But before we move too far, I'd like to mention this. The lines of authority regarding functions of the project goes from corporate over the project board over the project manager, and project manager over the team managers and team members. So that means that line of authority is established, and that line is supposed to be followed, meaning that the team members and team managers report directly to the project manager reports directly to the project board, and project board directly to the corporate or program. So when it comes to handling and having authority over issues and changes, there's a bit of a change in that aspect. The team managers and team members have no right to authorize changes, but they can raise issues. Okay. However, when it comes to authorizing changes, the line of authority goes from corporate to project board to change authority, and change authority to project manager. So project manager has the least authority in authorizing changes. You would, however, observe that the project assurance and change authority do not have authority over the project manager. The only authority the change authority has over the project manager is authorizing changes. Please take note. Okay. Now let's move on to the next slide where we discuss each role in depth. Thank you. The project board. So like we mentioned earlier, the project board has all the interests represented. The business interest is represented by the executive, the user interest represented by the senior users, and the supplier represented by the senior suppliers. So the executive has ultimate accountability over the project. The person has to make sure that the project is successful. Happens to be the key decision maker, and they have to make sure that the products achieve the benefits. Funding and monetary authorities also lies in their responsibility. So they have to make sure they are the ones who have the authority to give us the permission to spend money. The senior user represents the user interest. So their focus is on the needs of the user. The users are the ones that will decide what we have to use to realize the benefits. So they define the product. And of course, once the product is ready, they use the product to realize the benefits. And also, during the project, any information or detail or resource required by the project that is user related, the senior user has to provide. Now let me mention this. Anybody who has to use the product or who the product is being used for is considered a user. So for example, if a bank decides to do a project to create an application that helps the operations of the bank, the operations department of the bank use the product. That means they are users. The operations department of the bank use the products for the customers, the account holders. So therefore, the account holders are also users of that product. So that makes, if we're going to create that product, they fall under the users. Okay. Now for the suppliers. These suppliers, these are people who fall under the category of development, design, facilitation, procurement, any role that falls under that area regarding the project are considered to be suppliers. So their focus is always going to be on supplying information, technical integrity, details about how a product is going to be created or purchased on the project. So they are the ones that know how a product that is defined by the user will be created and delivered on the project. So the senior user is a key representative on the project board regarding that interest. So let's go over to discussing the project assurance role. The project assurance role, these people are accountable to the project board. They are assigned to project board members in the case where the skills required to give a certain information with respect to the interest the project board members do not have, or perhaps time is not in the hands of the project board member. They say they are not available during the period. So the project assurance members deputize in the area of tracking and confirming and advising on the project. They do not take the responsibility of authorizing on the project. No. So the project assurance represents interests. Therefore, the project assurance role that represents the business interest is known as the business assurance. The project assurance role that represents the user interest is known as the user assurance. And the project assurance role that represents the supplier interest is also known as supplier assurance. Now take note, these people do independent monitoring of the project performance on behalf of the project board. They cannot be the project manager, they cannot be the team manager, and they cannot be project support. They can also have access to the resources provided by corporate or program. Change authority. Change authority, like project assurance role, is responsible to the project board. The project board define the limits of the authority of the change authority. Change authority rule addresses requests for changes and of course what we call off specification. These terms will further define when we talk about the change theme. They are considered to be issues. Now, regarding the change authority, they, like I said, they're responsible to agreeing changes on behalf of the project board. Now, as mentioned earlier about the authority regarding changes, the levels given to the project manager is a list, while the next is given to the project board, and then the highest level is given to the corporates. But the project board have to determine whether they require a role or a deputy to handle certain changes. Now, in evaluating changes, you might need a technical evaluation, and the project board members may not have such a skill. Hence, they might need a personnel who would handle those type of changes. Hence, the position of the change authority is brought into the project management team. Now, in handling their duties, they always have to consider the document that talks about how changes will be handled during the course of the project. That document is called the Change Control Approach, simply defining the project's approach to changing or controlling change. Of course, every issue has to be measured against a severity or priority scale. The severity scale being any that you can find around, maybe using words like critical, major, significant, and minor, and also prioritizing them as follows using the must score rating: must have, should have, could have, and also won't have for now. So the change authority uses those when they are appointed. Their focus, like I said, is on agreeing changes on behalf of the project board. Project manager. Now, the project manager, as you're aspiring to be, these are the areas where you have to handle. Our focus as a project manager is on the management of the day-to-day activities. That's a focal point. You handle what we call line management. You handle cost management. Line management has to do with handling your teams. Cost management, handling funding and management of funds. You have to communicate. You have to understand quality expected. You have to be able to track product status. You have to be able to manage product and project needs. Of course, handling and authorizing changes comes to you as well. And of course, you must be able to identify user needs because your input might be required. Monitoring and control is important for the project manager. Planning is one of key duties of a project manager. And of course, leadership, which is on the teamwork, is expected. You must also be able to define approach on how to manage the project, because the focal point of the project manager's job is to make sure that the project is delivered. So as a project manager, you must be ready to work diligently and objectively in managing the day-to-day activities of the project. The team manager. The team manager is the team lead of the teams that come on board to handle delivery of a project product. So their focus is always going to be on the creation of the products. They have to agree work package from the project manager. The team manager can be from the customer or from the corporate, and it can be from the supplier side, depending on the kind of environment where the project is being handled. And that work is always going to be linked to the senior supplier on the project board. Depending on the size of the project, it can also be optional. So if you have a very small project, you might just have a team member, right? And of course, specialist skills, geography, and project work preferences influence the appointment of team managers. So let's go ahead and discuss the last role, which is the project support. The project support. The project support is responsible to the project manager. Assist the project manager in handling the registers and the logs throughout the project, handling clerical duties, recording items, updating, and all that come under the role of the project support. Now, the thing is, the project support may not always go to the site where the project is being handled. The project support might just simply be an accountant who's helping manage the funding for the project under the project manager's jurisdiction. Now, that person may not necessarily be on the project site or be working from the office. They have access to the use of tools to advise and to guide the people on the project. Of course, they handle what we call the configuration management procedure, which is the system to make sure every item on the project is unique and easily identifiable. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the support role is independent of the assurance role. You cannot have one person doing the same thing. That cannot be combined. Thank you. So, talking about combining roles, see, in tailoring the project, there's certain situations where one person may have to take two roles as defined from the roles we've mentioned previously on previous slides. But need to take note of this. When combining roles, consideration should be to any conflicts of responsibilities. Capacity of a person to undertake the combined responsibility should also be considered, and also whether the combination of the roles will result in a bottleneck. This has to be considered, but these key points need to be mentioned. The executive and the project manager cannot be the same person. The same person cannot be executive and also be project manager. It is not acceptable. There can only one person be the executive and one person to be the project manager. The executive's accountability for project success cannot be delegated. It means that that position of the executive is a very, very important one. And you can't just say because the person appointed executive is going to leave, then we'll just take the responsibility and give it to the senior user. It cannot be. But it can happen the other way around. So the senior user is no longer available. If the executive can take the responsibility of the senior user and has the skills to handle that, can combine those roles. Okay? Project manager, team manager, and project support cannot be project assurance. These are key things that you need to make sure when considering combination of roles. And of course, you need to take note of this. The senior user role and the senior supplier role cannot be taken by one person. The executive can be a senior user. The executive can also take the responsibility of a senior supplier, but the senior user and senior supplier roles cannot be combined. Please remember that. And of course, when we consider the organization theme, we need to mention where the resources can also be found. Resources to handle the project, resources and tools and skills, information, details to handle the project properly. Now, this place where you can find such information, templates and so on for projects can be found in a corporate office. And we usually know that office to be the center of excellence. In some organizations, they are known as the project management office. So there you find documents about how to manage the project, previous projects that have been handled, process flow, templates, tools, skills required, and assurance details that are required on a project. Now you need to know that because a project involves multiple people, you will definitely know that a project is cross-functional. Of course, we cannot consider the organization theme without mentioning how we communicate within the people. So, with the organization theme comes the definition of how communication will be handled. And we create a document that we call the communication management approach. Now, this document tells us how the roles and the people in the project management team will communicate within themselves, and also how the project management team will communicate with the external stakeholders. This defines the communication format, the presentation format, the frequency, and other details of how communication will be handled, the reports we're going to be using, the presentation scheme, whether we're going to be using dashboards, emails, whether you're going to be sending smoke signals, all those details will be mentioned in the communication management approach. Now, this document facilitates engagement between stakeholders. Now, note stakeholders are within the project management team and also external to the project management. The communication procedure has to be discussed and documented formally. If it's within a program, the needs of information regarding the program has to be mentioned. And of course, how we're going to review and report would have to be stated, especially what we do in the stage boundary. And of course, how project closure is going to be managed also has to be mentioned in the communication management approach. So basically, everything that has to do with communication comes under this document, and it's also part of the documents that go into the project initiation documentation during initiation. Let's go on. There's no way we will talk about the organization thing without mentioning stakeholder engagement. Now, a stakeholder is anybody that has interest in the project or has influence on the project and perhaps perceives that they'll be affected by the project as well. These are people that are considered to be stakeholders, and they have to be engaged. It's important to follow these 6 steps in handling stakeholder engagement. First, we need to identify the people that are going to be stakeholders. Depending on the project, you need to know that the people in the environment are stakeholders where you're going to be handling the project. The agents that you're going to use to get resources, they are stakeholders. The vendors that are going to be supplying resources, they are stakeholders. The staff of the corporate company, they are stakeholders. The corporate company is also a stakeholder. Of course, you also need to know that regulatory bodies involved in the projects you're doing, or the sector where the project is being handled, they are also considered to be stakeholders. So these people have to be identified. They have to be profiled so that we can know the kind of persons they are, which will help us to create a strategy on how to engage with these stakeholders. And of course, once the strategy is discussed, a plan will have to be created as well. And then of course, once this is done, when it's time to engage with them, we follow this plan according to the strategy, and the focus is to now check whether we have our expected results during engagement. So this is very important. Stakeholder engagement is important. A project always has stakeholders, so engagement with stakeholders is always going to be required. This brings us to the end of the organization theme. Now, we've defined the roles, we've defined the levels of organization, we've defined the document that tells us how communication is going to be handled, we've talked about the stakeholder engagement, and these are important things, all right? Always remember to go through this if you have any problem understanding them. It's always good to go over again and again. Thank you for following me through this journey, and let's go to the next thing, which is the business case theme. Thank you.